Hello, guys, and welcome to my second mock draft. This one will be a two-rounder. I'm going to make it a lot quicker than I did last time. And I think we'll see some changes. I haven't bothered to look back at my old one, but with that being said, let's get into it. So we have the Tennessee Titans picking first. This time around, and like they said about picking a generational talent, this time around, I really actually think that they're gonna, maybe pick a QB. And I am actually gonna say that they pick Cam Ward. I think that Cam Ward is a guy that he looks the best, out of the QBs, and they want something that's gonna be stable. Now we have the Browns. I actually think that they take Shadir Sanders, who's set to visit with them. They are at the number 2 overall pick. I think the Browns as an organization can be like, well, hey, we'll take this guy and we'll dump Deshaun Watson, swallow his contract, which will suck. But they go and they draft Shadir Sanders. And they're like, hey, this is our guy. And we're going to try to build around him. Then we get to the Giants. The Giants, to me, they need, a QB. But I've obviously taken both QBs off the board. That would be first rounders. I personally think that the Giants are going to go defensive line. And I think they're going to take a tackle, and they're going to take, a guy that kind of fits their mold, fits, a bigger guy, like Will Campbell. And that's who I'm going to have them take. And then we get to the Patriots. Now, in my previous draft, I do remember this, but we obviously are getting to the Patriots, who are number 4, but they already have a QB. What better way to show you support your QB than to get him a legitimate weapon? I know that their offensive line is bad, but I think that they're really going to address that in free agency. They have so much money. They can really address that in free agency. But it's like a guy like Teteroa McMillan doesn't come around every day. And why not get Drake May, just a huge target to go to? And then we get to the Jaguars. Obviously, you kind of want defensive interior if you're them. Do they go that right away? I don't know about that. They need a center and they need a guard. They also need a DB. I think this could be one of the kind of interesting spots where we then go and say they grab Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter goes to Jacksonville. He can play wide receiver, which they are kind of shallow at, and obviously Christian Kirk. His future is kind of up in the air with the team. The rumors around him being traded are circulating. Maybe he goes and he plays CB, which they need, or possibly wide receiver. And it's like, who knows? Once we get to the Raiders to me, they could trade Max Crosby. They could really shore up a lot of picks. But if they trade Max Crosby, then I really think that they're going to grab an edge rusher. And they're going to grab the best edge rusher in this class, in Abdul Carter. A big guy at 252 and 6'3". Quick, young, that they can develop. A guy that, maybe Pete Carroll likes. Moving on to the Jets. The Jets, a team to me that it's like you want receiving threats. It does seem to me like Garrett Wilson is going to be happy if Adams and Rodgers are leaving. Obviously, with Rodgers leaving, it's more than likely that Adams is also going to get released. So we're looking at wide receivers. Obviously, right here we have, Luther, who's, a below average, kind of height, not a taller guy. Same kind of size as Garrett Wilson, a little bit heavier. Then you've got Egbuka, who, is a little bit taller, a little bit older, but, not much of a difference. I think that if you are the Jets, you're going to be looking, for a wide receiver that's, of the taller variety. And there isn't really any here. So, maybe they go and they try to shore up their O-line and they take the next best O-line in Josh Simmons. I know it's probably not the pick that you would want to see if you are a Jets fan, but they need offensive line help. And then we look at the Panthers. They need a DB, they need D-line. They go with Mason Graham to pair him with Derek Brown on the interior of their D-line out of Michigan. Going with the Saints. You really need just more wide receivers that can stay healthy potentially, with so many of them getting banged up. But I'm actually going to be bold here, and I actually think that with the guy obviously Mond coming from the Eagles, and then he sees Ashton Jeanty on the board, and you have Alvin Kamara, but you need a true bruiser back, and we all know that Kamara is getting up there in age. They go bold and they grab Ashton Jeanty at pick number 9. Now we get to the Bears. Running back was one of their needs. They need centers and guards, and they also need an edge rusher. I think that if you are the Bears, you are actually going to look for a lineman right here and that sort of thing. So looking at that, you're probably likely to reach right here. You don't really have anybody up here that's like, oh, we're going to grab this guy. This is the guy we're going to go and we're going to go get, unless they feel the need to go after another edge rusher, which I just don't see it. I think that they're going to go offense, but I don't think it's going to be wide receiver. I think that they do reach and they would go Kelvin Banks Jr. here, because they really need an O-line to be able to keep Caleb Williams, way more upright than he was his first season. Moving on to San Fran. I think that San Fran, they need an interior, and they're going to go with Kenneth Grant, another solid defensive interior to really shore up their D-line that is really lacking talent and, is injury prone. Looking at the Cowboys, obviously the news that their Hall of Fame lineman, I forget his name, is retiring. So they now are going to need a lineman. But then you also think on defense, it's like you've got Malaki Starks, but maybe you go wide receiver. I feel like, if you are the Cowboys, you're probably trying to get, a defensive player or something like that. Who knows if Micah Parsons leaves? I think that they're going to go and they're going to draft, a guy who's, going to be a flyer and, played very, very well, Mike Green, who went to Marshall. He seems to fit the mold. They can easily convert him to an outside linebacker in their scheme and have him rush the passer. Now we've got the Dolphins. The Dolphins, to me, they don't care what size their receiver are. They have Luther Burden III fall right into their lap. The Colts, to me, they do need a tight end. And, tight ends are deep in this, but why not just go with the best one in Tyler Warren? I think that they have a solid, core. Nothing crazy good. Pittman's very serviceable, but you need a guy to kind of draw attention from Pittman to help him shine and be a mismatch, and that's Tyler Warren. The Atlanta Falcons, you're clearly going to go defense. You go Malaki Starks here, best player available, to pair alongside Jesse Bates. Cardinals, to me, they need some D-line. To me, they need some pass rush. You're going to go Walter Nolan. A big-bodied guy, young, can plug and play, on your defensive interior. The Bengals, clearly everyone's thinking they're going to need wide receiver. You really only, you're probably only going to have Jamar Chase and then Yoshi Vosh, who really most people still don't even know. You're probably going to lose your tight ending Gesicki as well. And it's like, hope your defense, to be honest, should play better because your defensive scheme was just garbage, even though you had a lot of the same kind of pieces from years prior to make it good. But I honestly think that, if you are the Bengals, you're going to go and you're going to draft an edge because you're more than likely going to lose Trey Hendrickson, who wants an extension, who wants more money, who has been producing at a very high level. Now on to the Seahawks. You more than likely are going to draft, a wide receiver. This team, I think their defense played well enough when they were healthy and they gained momentum as the season went on. I think that their wide receiver room could be without Metcalf and Lockett. And then you're with JSN. So you're going to go and you're going to draft a guy. And you're going to draft a guy that, is a taller individual, who is a guy that really does that for you. Nobody in the early rounds. So it's like, what do? You probably do draft, a defensive interior to try and shore up that run game that was very spotty last year. And you go Derek Harmon out of Oregon, a duck, becoming a sea chicken. Sorry, Seahawk fans. But now the Buccaneers. What do the Buccaneers need? I think that one of the main reasons their defense got gouged, specifically by Kirk Cousins twice last year, and we all know, what he ended up being like. You need an edge rusher. You are going to go Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. And he's going to be your guy. Now with the Broncos, you need another wide receiver. You are going to take the best available. You are going to take Michael Williams. Oh, goodness. Okay, I just messed that up. I meant they were going to take Igbuka. Oh, okay. Okay. Without that blunder, I could see them taking an edge. Even though they had like the most sex in the league last year. We're going to move on and act like that didn't happen. The Steelers, you need wide receiver help. We're going to have them take Igbuka, even though, from what I intended, but anyway, we get to the Chargers. clearly in need of, a running back, another wide receiver, but the wide receivers at this spot, it's like you've got Matthew Golden and that's it. Maybe Omarion Hampton if you don't bring back J.K. Dobbins. You grab this guy to be kind of your big pounding running back for Harbaugh in his system. Now we got my Green Bay Packers. Obviously, everyone thinks that we need a wide receiver. We've been heavily linked to T. Higgins. We've been linked to some other guys. We have the money to kind of sign those, but I feel like if Higgins is franchise tag, the asking price will be too steep. And then if you sign Devontae Adams, do you then go and draft a wide receiver in the first round? For the first time since 2002, I don't think so. I think that you are going to be looking edge. You're going to be looking edge. And maybe it's a reach. Maybe this is a thing. But I actually think you go and you draft Will Johnson to address your DB problem. Moving on to the Vikings. As we all know, they don't really have running backs. It's theorized that they bring Aaron Jones back. Cam Akers, who they traded for, became a free agent, and they don't really have that many running backs, but there's no one that's available, here. If I'm the Vikings, I am probably going defensive back, and I'm grabbing Jahdae Barron. Because Stephon Gilmore likely won't be back, and he was somewhat of a liability at times last year, despite the good pass rush. And you need to get some new young blood in there. Moving on to the Texans. Clearly, it was an issue that they did not have. They did not have, healthy wide receivers last year, and Stephon Diggs is likely to walk in free agency. You still have Tank Dell, whether he'll be back early, and then Nico Collins, but you're going to want to shore up your wide receivers. You go Matthew Golden. The Rams, they could really use, a tackle, in my opinion. I think that their linebacker room is pretty good. I think their DBs did well enough that it's not a huge position of need. Tight end definitely would be, but this is a deep tight end draft. I don't think that they reach for Colston Loveland. I think that if you're looking at this, you are looking at tackle, and the best tackle available would be Armand Membu. And you go with him, regardless of who your quarterback will be next year. The Ravens, clearly lack of wide receiver depth kind of hurt them. Zay Flowers being out, I think, really kind of screwed with their rhythm. Obviously, the picks that Lamar Jackson threw against the Bills, that didn't really help. They, by all rights, without those, they should win that game. But you probably want more weapons. Now, I think they don't go wide receiver though here. There is, if you scroll down quite a ways, a guy at 37, and it's like you could, grab like a tight end that's more of a wide receiver, being a big guy like this, Colston Loveland. But I personally think that they're gonna, losing Ronnie Stanley, I think they're gonna go with the best player available, and they take Gray Zabel, to kind of shore up that O-line and make sure that Lamar Jackson isn't having to do, what he does well, but you don't have to make him do it all the time. Now, looking at the Lions. Obviously, it's one of those things to me that you look at them and clearly having no pass rush really, really hurt them. So I do think that they take, a big guy like Nick Scorin and put him opposite this of Aiden Hutchinson, and that's their pick, to really solidify that pass rush and make sure that you are not solely reliant on one dude, even though it isn't really one dude, as their defensive interior D lineman, who also got hurt, does a good job of applying pressure. Now, looking at Washington, a team with, hate to say it, Scary Terry aging, they could use a wide receiver, but then you look at, their run defense. Their run defense that was, just to say, kind of bad. Kind of bad, to be honest with you. And you get smoked by the Eagles. who, it's like, don't get me wrong, they probably won't have the same run game next year. They're not going to have the same 5 as some are likely to hit free agency. I think that Mekhi Becton hits free agency, and who knows, maybe they probably do try to re-sign him. But it's like, you're thinking of all these future prospects and who you're going to have to pay and extend. Maybe they don't keep him. But I think, if you are Washington, you are going with a defensive interior in order to shore up and try to help, that D-line and Darius Alexander out of Toledo. Now, looking at the Bills, it's another team that really needs some young blood to really stay healthy and be able to play at a high level, because I think that their offense is a growing offense and you can't really discredit them. And while you could take Colston Loveland, I think that the tight ends you have are good enough and will continue to develop. And looking at this, I think you actually go Jalen Walker, a guy who can pass rush, a guy who can cover, a freakish talent, and you keep him away from Kansas City. Now, looking at Kansas City, they definitely need a tackle. They need D-line. They're losing a linebacker, perhaps. But to me, the biggest problem that this team had was their protection of Mahomes. Even with all the, flags he got for, roughing, he wasn't, it's like, you want to protect your focal piece, the piece that, in a few years, he could be the last piece from, the dynasty. And you're going to need to retool and rebuild and keep him healthy. So you go Josh Connerly Jr. here. Now with the Super Bowl winning Eagles, we look at them, and it says they need wide receiver, guard, edge, DB. I think it's kind of insane they say this. Obviously, if Darius Slay actually retires or he doesn't come back, you have Cooper DeJean, and then I forget the other rookie's name. I know who he is, but maybe, and I said this in the last draft, maybe you draft a guy who it's like you can plug in at wide receiver. And I still love, going Colston Loveland here. He can be a big body guy. Yeah, I know you have Dallas Goedert, who's, a great, and he's, good for Jalen Hurts. But why not really solidify this guy, do double tight end sets, and really create a new kind of front that, can do some crazy things, and make these teams off balance, because, the defense, I think the defense is going to be fine. The way they played, the tenacity, the amount of talent they have. Yeah, they're likely to lose Zach Bond probably. But it's like, if it's, maybe it's based on the scheme that he was able to do well. Only time will tell, obviously. But moving on to round 2, we have the Browns. Obviously, the Browns, we in round 1 we took Shadir Sanders, their future QB, and we look at their team. So it says they need a running back, a tackle, a CB. I do really think looking at this that it's like, you would love to have a running back. There's none available around here, and then you look at some of these other guys. You probably take, Trey Amos in this draft, to solidify your DBs, even though, because maybe you do trade Greg Newsome, or maybe you trade Denzel Ward. Who the heck knows, right? With all the trade rumors that get thrown around, or maybe these guys will be unhappy and they don't want to be there. So you'll just need a DB. Now moving on to the Giants, with the Giants, we took, a tackle, to protect and to kind of shore up that line. What do we take now? They really need, a QB. They need a DB. They could use another tackle. Personally, I think you just, you look at this right here and, you settle and you take Alec Ayamanor, who's it's a little bit of a reach, but you are going to need wide receivers, and Malik Neighbors can't just carry your team, and the loss of Darius Slayton. Now the Titans, obviously took a QB with them, and Cam Ward. What do you need with Cam Ward? Or what do you need on this team? You probably need protection, but really there's not that much of this right here. I actually think that you go edge rusher here. Obviously one of their needs, obviously DB is one of their needs as well, but I think you need the best, edge rusher available at this point, and you take Donovan Izaruaku. Sorry if I butchered that name. The Jaguars. I obviously took, the potential, generational kind of dual player, with them. And one of those things to me is that, like, we don't know what they're going to be playing him at. But we also know that the pass rush wasn't very good last year. So, maybe you pair a defensive interior, a guy who's not necessarily an edge rush, but is a guy that, is quick-witted, young, and, a quick guy in TJ Sanders. The Raiders. Obviously without a QB, obviously without a running back, I had them drafting an edge and that sort of thing. I think that this is a team that is going to need, and we know that Pete Carroll values his linebackers. So they're going to take Jahad Campbell, who happened to fall this deep to them. Now the Patriots, we had them take a wide receiver early. Now it's time to address, defense, and in the later rounds, you can grab some, guards and tackles, because there's none available right here. And, the closest one at this point is, ranked 56. But I have no doubt in my mind that Vrabel will figure it out. And it's like no inside O-line either. So it's like, I have no doubt that Vrabel will figure it out. He was on a team that had an incredible O-line, and it's like, I'm sure they're going to go and they're going to grab some guys that are going to be plug and play on this team. So looking at this, who do they really take? Who is a guy, and that you want on this team? We're at pick 38. Perhaps you have another DB that you put a lot, on the opposite side of Christian Gonzalez, and you grab Siobhan Revel. The Bears. Obviously, with who, obviously in round one, the Bears, who did we take with them? We took a tackle because honestly, their biggest need. They obviously, they needed a tackle really, really bad. You look at this right now, you're kind of looking, and it's like, oh, there's a lot of defensive players. You have defensive interior, a cornerback that you don't really need. Linebacker maybe. But, I honestly think that they're going to go with someone for their interior. I think that the run, defense, wasn't the best on the Bears last year. They were good at, I guess, getting turnovers every now and again. But I think they go Shamar Turner, a tall senior, 22 years of age, 300 pounds, to shore up that defensive interior. Now looking at the Saints, I still think that, there's certain guys on their team, defensive-minded coach. I think that if you look at, their D coordinator, I forget his name, was obviously the Chargers head coach the last time he was employed. Never really had a linebacker to, really do very well. And it's like you have an aging linebacker and you take the best available in Demetrius Knight Jr. Now we got the Bears again. We took defensive interior. We took tackle. Perhaps you look at this team and you think, maybe we do grab a DB. Maybe we grab a guy who happened to fall here. We look at Benjamin Morrison, who is a taller guy, a young guy who can learn from Jalen Johnson. And, we could always use, you can always use more DBs should someone get injured. The Jets. I'm looking here at the Jets, and I'm thinking we took a tackle in the first round, and then it's like, because you're looking at it and there's no like wide receivers, but it's like you're at pick 42 and you see Jack Beck here. Taller guy, slightly stocky, strong build, and you take him, to be another target for, whoever your QB is. San Fran. Debo could potentially leave. San Fran didn't have a pick in the first, or they did. We took defensive interior for them. I personally think they do need another wide receiver. I do think, though, that, guard, tackle, kind of a need. But then it's like, you haven't really solidified a guy to go opposite Bosa. You've had fill-in guys. I think that they go and they draft a guy in Princely, Uman-Milan. I definitely butchered that. To go on the edge, to go opposite Bosa, to really start to rework that D-line to the scary D-line that it was years ago under Robert Saleh. Now we have the Cowboys. The Cowboys, who in the first round, I'm pretty sure I had them take, an edge rusher. Obviously, at this point, it's kind of like, oh, who do we need? What do we need on this team? I think we just go defensive interior, because we don't know how long DeMarcus Lawrence is going to play for. He's getting up there in age. He wasn't fully healthy last year, and that's what we do. The Colts, I had taken a tight end early. They definitely need an edge rusher, though. with them being at 45 and Landon Jackson being available, maybe they take this guy. A taller, bigger bodied guy, probably not though. So you're looking at Jack Sawyer, who obviously a taller guy, a little bit older, but 260 weight, a good size and lengthy. You take Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. Then we get to Carolina, the Falcons. We get to Atlanta, who in the first round we had taken a safety because he was the best available. But now you really look to edge. They do not need a wide receiver. I don't think that was their problem last year. I think that they take JT because Landon is more of a 3-4 guy. And this guy is a good size as well. Young, out of Ohio State as well. A top school. Carolina, or why do I keep saying Carolina? The Cardinals. The Cardinals in the first round, we took Walter Nolan to really shore up that interior for them. Now, you do think about guard and tackle, and you take Tyler Booker, maybe be a little bit of a reach, but you need to shore up that interior. The Dolphins, I had them take a wide receiver, right, in the first round. That's right, Luther Burden. A guy who fits their mold, honestly. Now I'm thinking of, we need to protect Tua. But like I said, a lot of the top guys, a lot of the top tackles, early first round talents, and then it's a big drop off. Perhaps you try to shore up your defense. I remember they had missed tackles a lot. They didn't have the best, and that sort of thing. I think you go and you do take Landon Jackson here. Big bodied guy to put on the edge and hopefully be that stronger guy for you to, start the rebuilding process of your terrible run defense. Looking at the Bengals. The Bengals, to me, it's like, it's defense. While you'd like to draft a good amount of offensive guys, I don't think that is their play. I think that, you want defense if you are a Bengals fan with the way they played last year, and here, the one exception that I'll say is I think that they do need a halfback, and it's like Scatabo is right here, who's ranked 51, had a high overall grade, and, is kind of a shorter guy, but stocky, a guy who can possibly take the workload. So you take Scatabo because your running attack was so horrendous last year. And you look to O-line in the later rounds. Now looking at the Seahawks, I personally think that Julian Love, is a good DB. But then you look at who they have opposite, they don't really have anyone opposite. Here you take Xavier Watts. To cover that over the top. And you really solidify that DB room. You make it so that you don't have to draft there for years to come. The Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers, I like Vita Vea. Vita Vea is a great defensive interior, maybe top 5 in terms of run stuffing. And in the first round, we did take an edge because that was one of their issues last year. I think you go back to back and you take Alfred Collins, who was ranked 50 and, fell down to 51. The Broncos. I personally think the Broncos, they need, more wide receivers. I think that, in round 1, I had them take, well, that was an accident. That was an accident, though. Here, I would realistically have them taking taking an edge. I would have them taking an edge here, and I would have them taking Jared Ivey, instead of that first round pick, or potentially a wide receiver. The Steelers, we're still not to a point where really, we're still not really to a point where there's, another a QB to be taken. That's not even really in the realm in the second round, unless you're really like a guy, and there's no way that I can, project that. Minnesota tends to produce pretty quality players that enter the NFL. I am going to have them take Ariante Ursary because they need to shore up their O-line. Their O-line that you had two good running backs that just couldn't produce well enough. And then when push came to shove, your quarterback couldn't get it downfield effectively enough for you to convert and sustain drives. You need a tackle. The Chargers. So the Chargers, looking at this, I think the Chargers, maybe you just shore up on, DB potentially. You grab a guy because you're afraid that Asante Samuel Jr., who had some injury problems, is going to walk this offseason. You take Darian Porter out of Iowa. Now Green Bay's second pick, my team's second pick. If we're looking at this, perhaps, my Packers obviously took, I had them take an edge rusher, correct? Let me see. Or no, a CB, Will Johnson. So it's like you really want to address like edge potentially, but then you don't really have that. But you are, losing some defensive interior potentially. And if that does happen, I think you're looking at some of these other guys. And you're looking at, potentially Joshua Farmer. Not a crazy high grade, but he's a bigger guy. But who knows? Maybe they feel the need to go a wide receiver here, who it's like, is a speed steer like Xavier Restrepo is, and or you want to shore up linebacker because there's a linebacker here, and it's like while you have Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, potentially Eric Wilson and Isaiah McDuffie could walk in this offseason, and Carson Schlesinger, more of a coverage guy, but, a quick guy, from the Bruins. So it's like, what is the pick here? Kyle Kennard would be a reach, obviously, but maybe you go with Joshua Farmer. You go and you shore up that defensive interior because it was kind of lackluster last year. And we all know how Gutekunst likes to create competition. Now looking at the Bills. Defensive interior, linebacker CB. In round one, we had them grab, a linebacker that should be good for years to come for them. Maybe you then do look at potentially an edge rusher or an interior D lineman. The only one available, up here really is Omar Norman Lott. A big guy to really kind of fit in there when your other guy is Ed Oliver, who isn't really the biggest guy. Sure, he's strong, but shore up your defensive interior. And if you like to run nickel so much, maybe you get some beefier guys on your D-line in order to, shore it up and, make it harder for teams to run against you potentially, even though you did a decent job against the run later in this season. The Texans. The Texans, to me, obviously good edge rushers, good wide receiver core, but needed depth there. Their defense is fine. But, for me, looking here, you have your running backs. So that's really not a thing. But maybe you do go Carson Schlesinger. For the sheer fact that you had a guy that was suspended last year, who knows, that probably won't happen again. But your linebacker room was incredibly shallow last year, from what I remember. And he's the best available. Now looking at the Panthers, you got D-line and DB. I personally think that they need... they might potentially need a better running back. I think Chuba Hubbard, maybe it is because of their O-line or that sort of thing, or maybe you do go edge here, because I think that was one of their issues, was a lack of pass rush. And a pass rush, essentially can upgrade every other position. So you're looking at Kyle Kennard here. Tall, good size, a lot of experience as a senior, out of the South Carolina Gamecocks, and you grab him. Baltimore, we drafted tackle. I do think that we need wide receiver, and obviously a lot of the times, from what I've noticed with, the drafts recently, is that the Ravens, they seem to draft these particular guys that are going to, help and fit their mold. I think this year, if you are the Ravens, you are looking for a taller guy. And you go Jaden Higgins, one of the taller guys, similar build to Moss, 6'4", 215. I think Moss was 210, a senior, experienced, and you grab him right here. To, really get another tall wide receiver to, go up and catch some footballs from Lamar Jackson. Now we got the Lions. We drafted edge for them because they desperately needed it. They can't completely rely on Hutchinson as their only guy. Even though if he's playing, he can handle that sort of a load. But it's I doubt it's going to happen. But who knows if he comes back and he's not the same game wrecker that he was last year before the injury. They say center and guard are needs. I think hogwash. Edge, we drafted. Linebacker, they were injured at a lot. But it's you look at this, and you look at kind of who they're losing. They don't need a wide receiver. They definitely don't need halfbacks. They don't need tackles. Drafting another edge would just be, bold to see who's hot. But it's you look at, all that's available here, and none of it really screams who we should grab. I'm going to go and I'm going to draft Chris Ball Jr. for them because I think, with a good, with a stocky height, and that sort of thing, I think he can really help their defense. I think they really need linebackers. They were injured there last year. They did happen to get their guys back, some of their, their main guy back. For the playoffs, but it's with injury history, it's this could be a need. And it's we don't want to be stuck with a lot of linebackers that had no playing time. Looking at Washington. Who did I have these guys take in the first round? Washington, I did defensive interior because of that porous run game. That's right. Now looking at this, I'm going to have them grab a wide receiver. I think Washington is kind of an untraditional offense. It might make sense to have them draft a halfback here. Maybe not. But, perhaps they do also want to keep Jaden Daniels upright. I'm actually going to lean with the later, and I'm going to have them go and draft Donovan Jackson, the best O-line on the board right now. And then the Bills. The Bills with a good amount of picks. We have defensive interior, and then we had linebacker. Now would maybe be the time that they go and they draft an edge rusher. And they go with Josiah. Is this a guy, maybe? You go with this guy, senior but young, only going to be 22 years old. You grab him. And then we look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously for them, I had them draft a linebacker because of, or a tackle because of the protection for Mahomes. They really do need a linebacker. But I honestly think that they go wide receiver here. They're losing wide receiver. Why not go with a guy who is the rank 53 right now, and you grab Restrepo? Then the final pick, the Eagles. The Eagles I had going with a tight end, obviously, to make their offense even more dynamic. They obviously don't need halfback, which a lot of these guys are going to be falling. Maybe you do go and you draft, an O-lineman, and then you plug him at guard. Cameron Williams, how big are you? You're 335. Not as big as Mekhi Becton, but maybe they grab this dude out of Texas and they plug him in. And that is going to be my draft, you guys. If you want... if you want to look at this, I'm going to kind of scroll down. Here, let me scroll down slowly so you can kind of look at the final results here. And I guess they don't show the second round. But that was, this was obviously the first round. If you want to see the remainder of the picks, you can do so. I know I kind of babbled on and on, checking to see what their picks were to really make it, that sort of thing, but I like this draft, for some teams and that sort of thing. And it's it seems like there will likely be, it seems to me like there will be some trade downs based on what, went on here. But if you like this and if you liked NFL content, if you thought, oh, this is kind of an interesting pick, I haven't seen this, comment that or comment anything, your thoughts and opinions on this, but this is Cast, and this is my second mock draft, first 2-rounder, for this off season. And as always, go Pack Go.